It's thanks to me that you're alive, you parasite. If you have a problem, then divorce me and get out. In John's eyes, the kindness that was evident when we first met was now gone, replaced chilling coldness. The glasses he wore and the tie around his neck looked rather expensive, making it clear just how self-centered John had become just from his appearance and behavior. Fine, I'll leave. I said that, packed my things and left immediately. And I vowed to retaliate against John. My name is Linda. I work as an administrative assistant in a company and live with my mother. Although I may seem pretty ordinary, there's one thing about me that sets me apart from everyone else. I use a wheelchair. In fact, due to a traffic accident I had in my student days, I have to live my life in a wheelchair, even though I wasn't fatally injured. When I first started using a wheelchair, there was a lot I had to get used to, and it was quite challenging. But, you know, people are resilient, and once you've spent enough time in a wheelchair, you get the hang of it. Sometimes, I wonder if this is what people would call a silver lining in a cloud. To be able to think that way probably means I've come to a good place, mentally. But just going to work and coming back home isn't enough to make life fulfilling. So my favorite pastime is going to the local library in town to read. I've loved books since I was a kid, and even now as an adult, I'm still a bookworm. And that day too, I was at the library. But on that day, there was a medium-sized rock at the entrance for some reason, and I had trouble getting past it. The one who helped me was John. With his help, I was able to enter the library without a hitch. From then on, I often saw John at the library, and eventually we started dating and finally got married. And so I began living with John. But after a while, John made a surprising proposal. Linda, I want you to take good care of our home, and I want you to be my rock. So I'd like you to be a stay-at-home wife. Please? Wait, a stay-at-home wife? John suddenly pleaded with me to become a stay-at-home wife, but, to be honest, I really didn't want to quit my job. But John kept asking me over and over to be a stay-at-home wife, so in the end, I gave in. My colleagues never expected me to resign and tried hard to convince me to stay. But at the time, I prioritized my husband's wish over everything. In fact, just the act of telling the company that I wanted to resign was exhausting, and by the time I did resign, I was mentally drained. Since I quit my job, life has felt dull and uninteresting. Out of boredom, I called my old college friend Alicia to vent, but she was quite critical of my feelings. In this day and age where both men and women usually work, husbands who ask their working wives to become stay-at-home wives are rare. Linda, you're blessed, and you should be more grateful for your current situation. Alicia, unlike me, always talks about wanting to quit her job. It was clear that we had contrasting views. I had hoped Alicia might at least pretend to empathize with my frustrations, but she completely shut me down, leaving me feeling lonely. Plus, the allowance John gives me for household expenses is minimal, and I've had to be very frugal. When it wasn't enough, I had to dip into the savings I had accumulated when I was working full-time. Because of that, I was determined to not overspend and started cutting back significantly on my beauty expenses. Still, my savings were dwindling. Watching the balance decrease became a sad daily ritual, leaving me in a sour mood. But I found it hard to voice these concerns to my hardworking family, so I kept silent. So without my fulfilling job and having to skimp on beauty expenses, the only joy left in my life was borrowing books from the library. Libraries are great, right? Being able to borrow books for free is awesome. At that time, I was more focused on saving money, and the joy of reading was overshadowed by the fact that I was borrowing books for free. It was a bit of a shock to realize how having less money could change one's perspective so much. Nowadays, with streaming services, you can listen to music for free. And there are definitely more free entertainment options than a few years ago. But, no matter how many free entertainment options there are, the reality of having less money still brings down your spirits. Even in such a situation, I still loved John. I didn't want to bring up anything with John that could lead to an argument, even if it meant distancing myself from him. For that reason, I never told John about the lack of household allowance. Instead, I silently endured, escaping reality by immersively reading books while listening to free music. However, after a while, John started coming home late more frequently. Concerned, I asked John, "You've been coming home late recently. Is something wrong?" To which John replied, "Work's been busy, and I've been working overtime. Sorry for making you worry." Honestly, in this modern age where overtime is becoming rare, I wondered if he could really be working late so often. But given that I was relying on him for our living expenses, I found it hard to question him further and let the matter slide. But one day, John unexpectedly stayed out overnight. Feeling suspicious, I checked John's phone while he was in the shower. To my dismay, it was full of evidence that John had been cheating on me. Moreover, it seemed that the woman he was seeing had been in a relationship with him even before we got married. Even after finding undeniable proof, I didn't have the courage to confront John about his infidelity. I guess back then I was still in love with him and couldn't muster the strength. However, I was hurt by his betrayal and saved the evidence of his affair on my phone. The revelation of John's cheating devastated me. On top of that, there was no sign of him increasing the allowance he gave me. Even though we were married, I wondered why I was the only one enduring such misery. Overthinking the situation gave me migraines, adding to my worries. Life felt so terrible. Yet, every morning, I had to prepare breakfast and lunch for John. By that time, I had grown weary of making meals for him, wondering why I even had to cater to such a man, often sighing in frustration. John seemed oblivious to how I felt, quietly eating his breakfast and heading off to work with his packed lunch. He's probably gonna come home late again, I thought, sighing once more. But surprisingly, John came home early that day and dined with me. However, he began criticizing me, saying, "The dinner today tastes off. And you're my wife, you should try to look prettier." Looking back, John might have been having dinner at his mistress's house, which could have been why he was coming home late. So, without realizing it, he might have been comparing me to his mistress, which is probably why he made such comments to me. I finally lost my temper and shouted at him. "After all the effort I put into making dinner, all you do is complain. Plus, I know about your affair. The reason I can't always look my best is that you barely give me enough money to get by. I've been using up my savings from when I was single because what you give isn't enough. I was better off when I was working and single." John, realizing that I knew of his affair, impulsively picked up a vase nearby and splashed its water at me. I was trembling, both with rage and fear from his unexpected behavior. John, seeming completely unapologetic, said, "You're just a leech living off me. If you've got a problem, divorce me and leave." His eyes, once filled with kindness when we first met, now appeared cold and distant. Looking closer, I could tell that even the glasses and tie John was wearing seemed expensive. Just by his appearance and behavior alone, it was clear how self-centered he was. "Well, I'm leaving," I said, quickly packed my things and left right away. And I swore to myself that I would get back at John. Although John clearly saw me leave the house, he made no move to stop me. In fact, he had an expression that almost seemed grateful I was going. I was shocked by how much John had changed. It chilled my heart to realize how quickly love can fade, even after we had been so in love when we got married. I think I was probably crying at that moment. By the time the taxi I caught reached my parents' home, my tears had stopped. But the emptiness remained. My mother greeted me with surprise but warmth. "I don't know what happened, but come on inside." "Thank you, Mom. It's okay, honey. We're family, it's what we do." "Yeah, thank you so much." The moment my mother hugged me, I started crying again. I thought my love for John had long since faded, yet I still found myself crying over him. Maybe deep down I didn't want to leave John and was shocked by our separation. With so many emotions swirling inside me, my mother held me close, never letting go. Wrapped in my mother's love, I felt alive again and an overwhelming sense of happiness. "Something must have really hurt you." Seeing me cry, my mother stroked my head just like she used to when I was little. We went inside and my mother tried to distract me with some funny TV shows and offered me some oranges she had gotten from a neighbor. By the time I finished the oranges, the TV show that came on was a comedy show that John and I used to watch together. It was a simple show where a humorous host chatted with comedians and celebrities. We really loved it. I was just silently watching that show, but I must have had a somber look on my face. Seeing me like that, my mother must have become worried and asked, "Linda, did something happen with John?" "There's been a lot, Mom. Honestly, I don't even know where to begin." "Oh, I see. It's okay, Linda. Take your time and tell me at your own pace. Okay? Yeah, I'll do that." With that, I told my mother everything that had happened. After listening to my entire story, my mother was livid. "I can't believe someone would make my Linda feel this way. You can stay here as long as you want and relax. It must have been hard on you." "Thanks, Mom. So you're close with John's mom since you both went to the same school. Could you maybe mention what John did to me?" "Got it. I'll talk to her the next time we see each other." Leave it to me. Thanks to my mother talking to my mother-in-law, John got into big trouble. I had a missed call from John on my phone. When I called back, John shouted angrily, "Hey, what's going on? The allowance I was getting from my parents suddenly stopped and it's causing me problems. You had something to do with it, didn't you?" Apparently, John had some debts from gambling, and he had been using about 70% of his salary and the entire allowance from his parents to pay it off. Due to the sudden stop in his allowance, he was clearly panicking. Though it was due to my mother's interference that John's allowance was cut off, I didn't want anything to do with him, so I played dumb. "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm busy. Bye." With that, I hung up. I felt a bit relieved knowing John was facing this predicament. But I wasn't completely at peace. The resentment I had towards John kept building up, and my stress had solidified over time. Just a little revenge wasn't going to be enough to ease it. And the thing is, when people have too much time on their hands, they tend to obsess over petty things. Of course, I was no exception. As days went by, my grudge against John only deepened, and there wasn't much I could do about it. I could have vented to my mother, but I felt bad complaining about the same thing repeatedly, and I already knew her response would be predictable. So I decided to reach out to my old friend Alicia. Alicia responded immediately. I could tell she was doing well. "I've got something to tell you. Want to grab a coffee sometime?" I suggested, and Alicia agreed enthusiastically. As the day approached to meet Alicia, I felt excited. It made me realize how much I enjoy social interactions. Just thinking about what to wear was exhilarating. On the day of our meetup, Alicia and I met up and went to a nearby cafe. There, I told Alicia everything about what John had done in the current situation. "I see, that sounds tough." "Yeah, and John would give me so little for household expenses, but he always bought expensive stuff for himself. His glasses had all these fine details and embellishments, and his tie was made of what seemed to be expensive fabric with beautiful red and blue stripes." As I described the unique features of John's belongings, Alicia seemed to recall something and went silent for a moment. After taking a deep breath, she asked me, "Hey, Linda, can you tell me your husband's name? I feel like I might know him." "Oh, really? You know him?" "His name is John Martinez. I do know him." "Wow, John Martinez is my boss. I really don't like him. He's so annoying and nitpicky, and his instructions at work are hard to understand." I had no idea. "But how did you figure it out?" "Well, I happen to remember my boss wearing a distinctive tie that looked expensive. So when you mentioned a similar tie, I just thought maybe, and bingo." I was shocked. "I see. So can you spread the word at the company about how messed up John is?" "That sounds good. If all goes well, he might quit, and you can get back at him." "I'd be happy to help." And so Alicia began to spread rumors about John being an unreliable husband at the office. Gradually, the news spread throughout the company. By that time, John felt like he was walking on eggshells, finding it difficult to be at work. After a while, I started receiving emails from him. The emails were about how he felt uncomfortable at the office and didn't know what to do. For my part, I felt like shouting at John, "Why should I care? If you hadn't done what you did to me, none of this would have happened. It's all your own doing." But I didn't want anything to do with John, so I ignored the emails. However, it's strange how men act. The moment a woman stops chasing after them, they start chasing the woman. I've read about this phenomenon in many relationship advice books, but I never thought it would actually happen to me. Probably because I had been ignoring John's emails, I received another email from him. After some thought, I realized that I needed to talk to you, Linda. I want to discuss our future and try to start over. Please, can we meet? I could feel the desperation in John's message, and by the time I finished reading, I was completely drained. Even a single email from John could ruin the good mood my mother and Alicia had set for me. Such power he had. Now, how to deal with this email? I did think about ignoring it again, but on second thought, John and I are technically still married. Honestly, I wished I could erase the fact that I registered our marriage with someone who brings me down. I even wanted to divorce him right away. So, thanks to John's email, I finally made up my mind to get a divorce. I acted swiftly. Alright, if we involve our parents in the discussion, I'm okay with meeting you. And that's how I responded to John immediately. Soon after, I received a reply from John, and I was able to get his approval. I bet John probably thinks that because I'm seriously considering our future together. That's why I've said I want to discuss things involving both our families. He's likely in La La Land, completely misunderstanding the situation. As for me, I was in the middle of a triumphant pose, having successfully led John to that mistaken belief. I had been strategizing with my mother about how we'd teach John a lesson, and my mother had shared the plan with my mother-in-law. Then, surprisingly, my father-in-law also decided to join our strategy. It seemed that my mother-in-law and father-in-law were appalled at John's irresponsibility and bad character. They no longer saw him as their son. That's probably why they sided with me in this situation. So, with everyone except John, we kept discussing and refining our plan. On the day of the confrontation, my mother and I headed to the house where John lived. Upon arrival, John greeted us with a smile, but I felt a chill. Already in the living room were my mother-in-law and father-in-law. When everyone had gathered, John began to speak. "Linda, would you live with me in this house again?" I calmly responded and began laying out the lawyer's business card and various pieces of evidence of his affairs on the table. Seeing this, John paled as my mother-in-law and father-in-law started berating him. "How could you, as a man, let Linda go through all that? I never thought you'd turn out to be such a loser. We're done with you. Really, I don't want to see your face anymore, John. Ah, Linda, you can always rely on me, okay?" With that, John was berated by his parents, got a firm disownment, and in the end, it was settled that he would divorce me. "Tell me it's a lie. I know I messed up. I'm sorry. Please, everyone, forgive me." John's pitiful voice echoed throughout the living room. Afterwards, my divorce from John went through smoothly, and a little later, when I informed Alicia about it, she said she had some news too. Given the cheeriness in Alicia's voice, I thought maybe she was going to get married, but that wasn't the case. Turns out Alicia joyfully informed me that John had quit his job. According to Alicia's story, after John and I divorced, he felt increasingly uncomfortable at work, and eventually chose to resign voluntarily. Well, you know, I'm just glad I don't have to deal with that annoying boss nitpicking or taking those lousy job instructions anymore. Really, it feels like a thanks for letting me go moment. Alicia's carefree voice came over the phone. As for me, hearing about John's voluntary resignation, I felt a mix of happiness and emptiness. I mean, I didn't like John anymore, but he was once someone I loved. The fact that he left his job because of our issues weighed on me a bit. But John not only subjected me to financial abuse, but also cheated on me. Maybe it was some kind of divine retribution. At least, that's how I tried to see it. Plus, John divided the property appropriately. Rumor has it that John is working day and night to pay off his debts and cover his living expenses. It seems like fitting punishment for him, if you ask me. As for myself, I've been living with my mother as usual. But I realized I couldn't keep doing that forever, so I started working as a full-time office worker again. Having had experience in administrative roles, I got hired quickly, and my company regards me as an immediate asset. They rely on me, contrary to popular belief. Believing that office work can be quite intricate when you delve into the details, we as administrative staff need to communicate well, teach each other, and sometimes cover for someone on maternity leave. Teamwork is essential in this type of work, and as a result, I have formed close relationships with my coworkers. This is why I truly enjoy my job. Even when I come home tired, my mother, who has remained unchanged from those days, warmly welcomes me and has dinner ready. We often chat about what happened at work today or engage in some lighthearted banter. These moments with my mother bring me great joy. In contrast, my married life with John lacked these warm moments and was rather bland. Therefore, I cherish this happiness every day, living joyfully with my mother. I cannot thank her enough.